if you're outside of Canada, this was, the most expected coronation. My only surprise was there was 400,000 registered voters and only 150,000 showed up. It's just amazing how people forget so quickly. Frankly, from my perspective, and people go, who's better to defend with Trump? The reality is, it's a crapshoot. Who the hell knows?
Welcome back to the tank, John. Holy crap. We got an emergency podcast here. Breaking news for everyone who hasn't seen this. Mark Carney has been elected the Liberal leader. The former bank governor, Mark Carney, won the Liberal leadership race with 86% of the vote, succeeding Justin Trudeau, who's now named the Prime Minister designate of Canada. And he will be sworn in as the 24th Prime Minister of Canada following the resignation of Trudeau. He will be appointed the 30th Canadian ministry of the same day upon taking oath in the office. That will become the first ever Canadian Prime Minister to have never served in prior elected office. John, so many things to talk about here, what happens next, but do you want to maybe just give some people who don't really know, for some of our international listeners, a little bit of background on Carney and how he was sort of put into this position after declining it a few times in the past?
If you're outside of Canada, this was, the most expected coronation, and it was done in such a way to not evoke the same criticism that Kamala Harris experienced in her coronation. So my only surprise was there was 400,000 registered voters and only 150,000 showed up. And there were two that were deemed invalid candidates, which had some drama on there, but there was zero drama on who would ultimately be the victor. Mark is a former investment banker from Goldman Sachs and joined the Canadian government in finance back in
2008.
2008, okay. And then became the Bank of Canada governor, and then eventually was the UK governor for actually during the Brexit. And there, he joined Trudeau's, Economic Advisory Council, which is, I don't remember, was maybe a couple of years ago, but has always been tied to the party. And I would say for the last 5-ish years, something like that, people have been waiting when he was going to officially throw his hat in the ring. So again, very much expected.
Yeah, not someone to overlook, though. Extremely qualified individual, right? He was the 8th governor of the Bank of Canada from 2008 to 2013, 120th governor of the Bank of England from 2013 to 2020. He is born in Canada, Northwest Territories, and raised in Edmonton, Alberta. He went to Harvard, graduated Harvard University in 1988, and studied at Oxford. As you mentioned, he was an investment banker at Goldman Sachs before joining the Bank of Canada. And then he obviously navigated a lot of things for the EU and Britain during the Brexit issues. And then he also was an advisor to the Canadian government during the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, according to Mark Carney, he was approached by Prime Minister Stephen Harper when he was the governor of the Bank of Canada to see if he would join the Conservative government as the Minister of Finance. He declined that in a 2025 interview. And then
it was claimed, although Harper sort of
not confirmed.
Well, he just, I don't know how strong of a request that actually was. It seems to be quite muted from the Harper side, but who the hell knows?
Right, exactly. But either way, here we are. And in September 2024, Carney was named by Justin Trudeau to the chair of the Liberal Party of Canada's Leaders and Task Force for Economic Growth. That's where it kind of started. And then it was briefly mentioned again upon the resignation of Chrystia Freeland, who was also at the announcement presentation as well. So where do we go from here, John? I mean, now we talked about this in terms of when the election will happen. He does not have a seat in Parliament. Obviously, Pierre has come out swinging against Carney, claiming a lot of things. Where do you think we go from here?
Well, I think in a previous podcast I had mentioned to you is that the expectation is In less than a week, we will see an election being called. I still will stick by it. The magical date that I was told, but who the heck really knows, was March 16th, with an actual election on April the 22nd. Two things that to comment on is uh, Carney has closed the gap with Pierre Poilievre, and I think the view in inside circles is it's not going to get probably any better from a momentum perspective. So they would be incentivized to call an election sooner. And then number two, from a budgetary perspective, the Conservatives have raised by far the most money for an election. So they would also be incentivized to have a very short election period, probably the minimum 37-day period that you're legislated with. So that's what I'm expecting. Again, who ultimately knows, but that's what I believe will happen, or at least be close to that.
Right. And the dollar has not really recovered, even with all this news. It's still hovering around 69.70 cents versus the US dollar. So it's not like people are really betting on this. I mean, we're obviously narrowing down the timing to an election, but as you mentioned, the polls are still showing a kind of a tight race, but I don't think it's going to get any tighter. I guess the question is, he's never really been tested in day-to-day politics, right?
And not during this leadership campaign at all. It was all softballs.
Right.
Because they knew that if they were to start to attack each other, it would actually hurt the party. So right now, he really hasn't been challenged really in any sort of debates, or to actually go more in depth with some of the ideas that he's been generally commenting on.
Right. And we're heading into obviously what's happening in the US right now. We've got, a potential Bank of Canada rate cut as well. It's going to be the seventh time in a row, bringing them down to an expected 2.75% among these like sort of trade tensions with the US.
Which will drop the currency even further.
Right. So I guess the question, for the audience would be, what is his platform? What is he anchoring on? We don't know.
I think, he's come up with a very high level
Are we going to see more? Is what I'm asking.
Yeah, we have to see more, because the I'd say the biggest questions that people are asking is he's made a commentary that he's not looking to cut any sort of programs, and yet is talking about some very significant additional spending. So either when you look at the other side of that, you either say, okay, so this means then that we're going to be borrowing substantially more, and the trend of our borrowing is going to continue to increase. And the only hint from that is this idea of separating operating budgets from capital budgets, which seems to imply giving you a license to spend so much more, number one. Number two, the other question is taxation policy. Canada's taxation system is already uncompetitive, and in a dogfight of a tariff war like this, taxation will continue to play a role. And as you know, tariffs is really a disguised form of taxation. Now, the one area that I think is attracting a lot of discussion, but not in-depth discussion, is the policy around the carbon tax. Now, the carbon tax is not being dropped. And this is the fallacy that people need to understand. It's the retail portion at the gas pump is being eliminated because, in Carney's words, it's attracting too much attention and discussion. They're going to take that and move it into the industrial side of the carbon tax. And so the tax still remains. The consumers ultimately pay for whatever business actually spends. You layer on the tariffs, which is, and again, it's another disguised tax. So the problem that you're going to start to run into is it's tax layer above tax layer. And one of the biggest issues, the number one issue, according to Abacus, is the high cost of living for Canadians. And that is probably going to be what's going to be under the magnifying glass most acutely.
Right. It seems like it's sort of building on the same platform mandates that the existing Liberal Party had under Trudeau, just carried on in different names. I mean, I remember very vividly when we had Mark McQueen on the podcast a while ago. He says the one thing in politics that never changes is the same kind of budgets that were in the prior, government are just relabeled and renamed and passed through as a different one. But nothing actually changes.
But you would expect that because it is all the same people, largely.
The bureaucracy is tied to their existing mandates.
So it hasn't
voted in.
Yeah, it hasn't changed. And Carney has been a very valuable member of the Trudeau broad team of folks, which is why everyone endorsed him so strongly, because he's not an outsider to them. So one would logically expect that it is a continuation of the last 10 years policies. And if you are aligned with the last 10 years, then it should be good for you.
Right.
If you are misaligned with that ideology, you should also understand that as well.
It's just so interesting to see the comparison in black and white between us and what the US is going through right now, right? They are trying to lower interest rates through the market, right? Not through just by cutting rates. They're trying to refinance $10 trillion of debt in the next 9 months. They're making the stock market kind of go lower, which is deflationary, support Main Street, and cut out expenses in the government as quickly as possible and not layer on more, which still seems like the path we are heading towards if we have a Liberal leadership.
Yeah. And the part that it's just amazing how people forget so quickly. Frankly, from my perspective, and people go, who's better to defend with Trump? The reality is, like, it's a crapshoot. Who the hell knows who would actually do better? And frankly, why are you guessing on something that you can't control in the first place? So what you can control is our domestic economy and all of the things that we've been doing domestically. If you should base your opinion on what they will do, each one, for the domestic economy. And if you believe one's better than the other, that's the basis. But to do something based on how a very volatile U.S. government is behaving, good luck. The Europeans are trying to figure it out, and they can't figure it out either. So I think it's just silliness. It was very convenient for that to occur for the Liberal Party.
Absolutely.
It's distracted the public, and it's been working quite a bit, saying, Canada doesn't have any problem. We were actually in great shape if it wasn't for this nut house in the White House. Well, folks, go back a couple of months. Trump's only been there since January the 20th. We're only 6 weeks in, and I heard a lot of people complaining what was going on before that. So I do wonder where people are going to calm down from an emotional perspective and actually focus in on what is most important, which is building a resilient Canadian economy and not trying to hope that some other country is going to come and be the panacea for us as well.
Absolutely, John. I feel like this tariff war is a kind of given the existing government more reason to issue more debt and also put out more funding. Like, they're committing over $6 billion to help small businesses weather the trade war. I mean, by the time this funding gets even allocated, the trade war might be over. So there's just a lot of this sort of thing that they're leaning into that I feel like they probably would have done with something else in the headlines if it wasn't there.
COVID 2.0.
Yeah, it feels like it exactly is. COVID 2.0, using an external factor to justify maybe some other, loans out there for individuals. Well, we'll have to wait and see. But thanks for joining us on an emergency podcast, John.
All right. Thanks, Matt.